Good morning. Today's book is Habakkuk. Habakkuk lived in a time when his nation was destroyed, his people were either killed, exiled, or some left in the rubble of a nation. We're living in a troubled time where our people has lost their way. We're in a pandemic where most of us have been isolated without the benefit of our routine daily living. We've never witnessed in our lifetime, even though we've known, if we've witnessed or listened to history, there things have happened at different times, different periods. We do know, as the people of Habakkuk knew, that things would end. Patience was needed, faith in God, understanding that God will make things right for the just who are living by their faith in God. Habakkuk is one of the minor prophets, and it's labeled minor primarily because the length of the book it's short. Habakkuk was written in the mid to late 7th century BC, shortly before the siege and capture of Jerusalem in 586 BC. The Babylonians was one of the ancient empires, and at that time they were the ruling empire of the ancient world. Habakkuk identifies himself as a prophet. Some scholars think that Habakkuk might have been a temple prophet. In Chronicles chapter 25 verse 1 describes temple prophets as those using lyres, harps, cymbals. Habakkuk 3 verse 19 suggests he might have been a Levite and a singer in the temple. There is less known about Habakkuk than any other author. His name may come from either Hebrew kahavaka, meaning embrace, or an Akkadian word hamabaku, meaning a kind of plant. Habakkuk witnessed his community, his environment. Historically, Habakkuk chapter 1 verses 6 through 11 indicates the period is mid to last quarter of the 7th century, the period where the Chaldeans rose to power. Their power and influence grew from 609 to 598 BC. Under threat of being destroyed, the king, who was 18 years old, was advised to surrender the nation before the Babylonian force even reached Jerusalem. The Babylonians were noted for their brutality, as indicated in chapter 1, verses 12 through 17. Their main method of conquering a nation was putting it to the torch, a scorched earth policy for the conquered territories, killing many of the inhabitants, exiling others, and leaving some to do whatever they could to survive in a decimated country. Habakkuk is one of 12 minor prophets. He, among them, are listed in the Masoretic and the Greek text. Minor only means that their books are short in length. In other words, they were people of few words. Again, he was doing his writing in the mid 7th century BC, just before the siege and capture of Jerusalem in 586 BC. Habakkuk identified himself as a prophet, though scholars think that he may have been a temple prophet. I don't know if he did that. The content of the book has 3 chapters, and it can be divided into 3 topics. 1, a discussion of between Habakkuk and God. 2, a list of complaints or oracle of woe. 3, a psalm or praising God. The themes. 1 is a discussion between God and Habakkuk. Habakkuk's doubt was growing because of what he witnessed, what had happened to the nation. His faith is being tested. He turns to God with his concerns, and he expresses what he had witnessed in the injustice, the sin, and the violence around him, and asks God, why does not God take action? Chapter 1, verse 2. God answers Habakkuk, and the question was answered in this way. God will use the Chaldeans to punish the people. Chapter 1, verse 5. Habakkuk replies, and some of the reply is centering around the attributes or characteristics he uses to describe God, and he also notes that God does not die. Chapter 1, verse 12. The second theme is judgment in chapter 2. God will punish the people, but God will also punish the Chaldeans, but much more harshly than he did his own people because of their violence. Chapter 2, verses 8 through 9. Chapter 3 is a psalm, or praises of God. Habakkuk began doubting God but in the end expresses ultimate faith in God. Even though he doesn't completely understand God's actions and use of bad people to judge better people. Chapter 3, 7, and verse 17 and 18. The period that, or at least scholars say the period in which this is going on is 609 through 605. Chapter 1 is Habakkuk his faith is tested. He's looking at the world, and as he knows it, and questioning where's God in all this? Why is all this going on, and God does not appear to be reacting to it or doing anything about it? And God answers him and says that the people will be judged. The Chaldeans were preparing, they were growing in power, they will invade the nation. Chapters 1, verses 5 through 11. Habakkuk's reaction, chapter 1, verses 12 through 17, he starts out with attributes or what he feels are explanations of God or the characteristics of God. God is everlasting. God cannot die. God uses people to carry out judgment. God can't look at wrong. God does not allow the wicked to swallow. Why does God allow the wicked to swallow up the righteous? Habakkuk equates mankind like fish in the sea being gathered up into nets. And he goes on to question, will God kill nations forever? And chapter 2, so Habakkuk submits to God. And though he's not fully understanding God's ways, he is willing to, as he puts it, ascending into the watch post of the tower to stand and wait on God. Chapter 3, faith triumphs. Praise for God. O Lord, I have thee. Revive thy work in the midst of the years. In wrath remember mercy. God's splendor covers the heavens, and the earth is full of God's praise. The Lord God is my strength, and God has made my feet like hinds' feet, and makes me walk on my high places. Hopefully, as we look at Habakkuk, which is from about 2,500 years ago. As we read our history, learn history, mankind doesn't really change. The only thing that we can remember is that God is with me and I am with God.